Hello, Doctor. Guten Morgen.
Mr. Pankejeff, I'm Dr. Freud. You wrote Das Wolfsmann.
Yes, I am Das Wolfsmann.
I'm not sure what you mean by this, Mr.
That is what many doctors have called me in the past in their writing.
Let's take this to the sitting room.
Yes.
Tell me, Mr. Pankejeff, what ails you?
Can't eat or dress myself without aid. I feel as though there's a veil between me and the world. I'm in a complete state of mental collapse, Doctor.
Would you mind discussing your childhood with me?
What do you mean?
Sense of relationships with your mother, your father, your siblings. Well, for that matter, just speak in general terms. Give me an insight in how you were brought up, Mr. Pankejeff.
I was born in Russia to a wealthy family. My father, he bred horses. He was an alcoholic. He committed suicide 3 years prior. My mother, she suffered from pains of the abdomen. My oldest sister, she also committed suicide.
Please elaborate on your relationship with your sister. How did her suicide make you feel?
Didn't make me feel anything. Frankly, Dr. Freud, I was almost gladdened by the event.
Were there any family members you took joy in?
Well, not a family member, but I was quite close with the nanny. She always treated me well.
Interesting. You mentioned your dream earlier. Can you describe in detail that for me?
Of course. 'Twas the night before my 4th birthday when I had this dream. I dreamt that I was lying in bed and it was night. Suddenly the window opened of its own accord, and I was terrified to see some white wolves sitting on the big walnut tree in front of the window. There were 6 or 7 of them. The wolves were quite white and looked more like foxes or sheepdogs. They had big tails like foxes and their ears pricked up like dogs, and they pay attention to something. I was quite frightened, in a great terror, evidently of being eaten by the wolves. I screamed and woke up. The nurse hurried to my bed to see what had happened to me. It took quite a long while before I was convinced that it had only been a dream. I had had such a clear and lifelike picture of the window opening and the wolves sitting on the tree. At last I grew quieter. I felt as though I'd escaped from some danger, and went to sleep again.
Your nurse being the nanny you are fond of. That's why they call you Das Wolfsmann.
Yes, Das Wolfsmann.
Could you illustrate this dream for me, perhaps, Sergei?
I can retrieve it for you, as you leave tonight, if you wish.
Please do.
Wait. Before you leave, Dr. Freud, if you're going to do psychoanalysis on my behaviors, I have a question. What's the reason for your cigar smoking?
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. This is clearly indicative of Mr. Pankejeff reaching his culmination of his Oedipus complex. The gender differences he experienced during his time in his childhood led to the current fears he holds. I hope you are well today. I was wondering if we could discuss your illustration. I had some questions.
Ask away.
Why were the wolves white?
This makes me think of sheep. My father used to take me to look at the sheep near our house, and this made me very happy. He was a very kind man, would often play with me, and sometimes he would playfully threaten to gobble me up. Shortly before I had the dream, an epidemic broke out. My father had the sheep inoculated, but this caused even more of them to die.
Why was there a tree?
Well, it made me think of a Christmas tree. I had this dream the night before Christmas, which is also my birthday. I was probably anticipating my double quantity of presents as I fell asleep. At some point in the night, the presents turned into wolves.
Why were the wolves' ears
pricked.
At the time, I was tremendously afraid of a picture of a wolf in a book of fairy stories. The picture was from Little Red Riding Hood. In the picture, the wolf was standing upright, with its claws out and its ears pricked. My sister used to tease me by holding the picture out in front of me, which would make me scream. See, I was a very quiet child, but my sister, she was lively and mischievous. My parents used to say that I should have been born the girl and she the boy. Later on, it became obvious that she was our father's favorite, and I was devastated. Many years later, she killed herself, and I hardly felt a trace of grief.
Why did the wolves have big tails?
I remember a story about a wolf that wanted to go fishing in the winter. He used his tail for bait, and it was snapped off in the ice. Around this time, I also remember being given some sugar sticks, which our nanny said were chopped up snakes. When walking with my father, we had once found a snake, and my father had beaten it to pieces with a stick. Shortly before this, my father had taught me the names of which horses are distinguished, according to whether their sexual organs are intact or not.
Why were the wolves in a tree?
See, my grandfather used to tell a story about a tailor who was sitting at work when a wolf leapt in through the window. The tailor managed to pull the wolf's tail off, and it ran away in terror. Sometime later, the tailor went into a forest and had to climb a tree to escape from a pack of wolves. The tailless wolf was still amongst them and wanted revenge, so it told the other wolves to climb upon one another to reach the tailor. The tailor, recognizing the wolf, cried out, "Catch the gray one by his tail." The wolf, terrified by his recollection, ran away, and all the others tumbled down.
I have one final question for you. Why were there 6 or 7 wolves in this tree?
This made me think of the story of the wolf and the 7 little goats, where the wolf deceives the goats into letting him into the house and by turning his paws white and imitating their mother's voice.
Thank you, Sergei. I'll see you tomorrow with a deeper analysis of your dream and your psychosis.
I identify the latent content of Sergei's dream to illustrate his fear of sexual difference in the horses being neutered and spaded, snakes being cut to pieces, tails falling off, and other wounds to the body. Pankejeff's identifications are namely his sister and mother. He switches the tailor and wolves' positions in the tree, meaning he wishes to switch positions with his sister. He seeks affirmation as his father's favorite. He gives the wolves large tails rather than having them fall off, to show a switch in activity to passivity in regards to his sister. Furthermore, he changes to have things look at him in his dream in response to his patient's wish of a gender reversal between him and his sister. What if the stillness of the wolves could be also reversed?
What's your diagnosis, doctor?
You were troubled by the idea of being your father's woman. Due to the construction of gender differences, you have determined the difference between man and woman through seeing your parents partake in a primal scene. You then awoke in a castration, anxiety, and an oral register due to your fear of being eaten by wolves.
After the Bolshevik Revolution, I lost everything. My wife and I lost everything before we even settled in Vienna. Although Dr. Freud did his best, I'm still not the man I could be.
Mr. Pankejeff, would you elaborate further on your relationship with Dr. Freud?
Yes, I've come to enjoy being a star patient. Psychoanalysts like yourself have treated me like the ultimate toy. They even have me sign under my pseudonym, Das Wolfsmann. Although he helped with overcoming my disdain for my sister and father, as well as my fixation on my mother, I believe he was wrong about one key thing.
And what was that, Sergei?
His idea of the primal scene. It had no reason. He constructed it himself. It came from his own mind, his own psychological projection.
What was he projecting?
Sometimes, Dr. Mack, a cigar just isn't a cigar.